Lottie Boggan is the author of 5 award-winning novels and dozens of short stories.
I am Lottie Boggan. I have just recently turned 90 years old. I just never thought that that would happen, but it did. And I woke up one day and I was a little old lady. I've been writing, really, I guess, since I was about in my 20s. I started in high school, and then at Ole Miss I won a couple of awards. And then I really got started. I'll tell the story, and this is, you tell me when I've said enough. I interviewed my grandmother when I was, I guess, in my 30s, and she was talking, and I said, well, what did y'all do for fun when you were growing up? And she said, my boyfriend and I, on Sundays, we used to go out to the cemetery. I said, okay. And I said, well, that didn't sound like much fun to me, the old Confederate cemetery. And she said, we would dance on the graves. And I said, well, okay. But this is how I got started. I started writing about my grandmother at the old Confederate cemetery, dancing on the graves with her boyfriend. And that's how my first book got started, set right after the Civil War.
And what is it called?
Redemption Ridge.
Okay.
There it is. And this is probably, truthfully, the best book I'll ever write. It won several. It won. I think it's the one that won the Faulkner Award, and this won the Eudora Welty Novel Contest, which was a pretty big thing back then. And I've got another one, Return to Redemption Ridge, that was set after World War I, which has to do with Willard's preparing the way for Willard's brother, who died as a bomber pilot in World War II. And it won some awards, a bunch of them. But anyhow, a lot of it, of writing for me and with Southerners, goes back to that old oral tradition that went into our raising. We didn't have television. We would sit out on the curb at night, with the mosquitoes and the street lights, and tell stories, and that was it. That's a different way of doing things now, but that's how we got started. And then, we come from the Bible Belt too. That's another thing. We grew up with Bible stories, and our parents read to us at night. That was another thing. We listened to the radio, and our parents read to us. It was just a different, no television, and certainly no cell phones.
When was your first book published?
It would have been probably in the 1970s. This is just a real good advice from a creative writing teacher. This was at Mississippi College. The man was a preacher at one time, then an alcoholic, and just one of those very multicolored lives. But he said, whatever you write, do it from a fullness of heart and a stance of love. Write what you know about it. He pointed to a chair tilted against a table. People who create are like that chair, leaning a little bit. Many of you have personality problems. Some will become alcoholic, but always keep love at the core of your being. And that's, just kind of where I am. Sometimes it doesn't end up at the core, love doesn't end up at the core of the being, but some bad things happen. But things usually come around, and the characters win. And
in your books, characters tend to win.
I think they tend to get a good feeling in their heart. They did the right thing. They didn't hurt another human being, and I don't know that I just set out to do it, but that seems to be what comes around,
So they're not dark characters; they're more positive people.
Actually, one of my books, there's a very dark character in it, which is actually built on someone I knew. And let's see if I see that. Yes, that's it right there, the top one right there. Salita's Secret. That's the cover of the book, the name of the book, and the character in it was based on somebody. And it was covered up so that I couldn't get sued. But
I think most people write their characters are based on people they know.
Yeah, well, this one really was. Most of my characters are not. Most of my books are not based on a bad character. This one influenced my life in many ways, and And so, and in the end, she gets it. I was married to the dearest human the good Lord ever created, and Philip knew him well. And I always said I could not make the man be bad. I tried many ways, many years, and it just didn't matter. Whatever I wanted, he would just do what baby says. And so that's my email that baby says. You know, he says whatever baby says is what we'll do. And the one thing he would do, he was going to win, as Philip knows this too. I mean, he would beat little children, he would beat elderly adults, and he had won. But other than that, he had the kindest, most caring, most loving heart of any human that a person can have. He goes back to another generation and another time and to me. But and he's right here with me all the time, you know. He truly is. He grew up across the street. I grew up across the street from him, and I knew him as when I was a little girl, and he was a graduate of medical school. Handsome, handsome, handsome.
How much older than you was he?
Willard was 12 years older.
12 years old.
And that was, back then, that was a pretty big age difference. And the other thing that was really big, I was a divorcee. And back in the 50s, you did not divorce. You were a tainted woman in my eyes and in other people's. You really were. You know, you just didn't divorce. I had no choice. This probably won't be part of the interview that you want. But I was married to a young man who ended up as a physician and neurosurgeon, and Philip, he died in his 50s on drugs. He was hard, you know, and may he rest in peace. I have no anger, but I thought nobody would ever want to marry me, you know, divorcee. And Willard got divorced. You know, he was married and had 2 girls.
Tell us more about your writing. You have a whole bunch of short stories and different.
Yeah, they just always kind of start with one little idea, and I don't really intend to make a short story out of it, but something happens, and then you just kind of go. Most of it kind of goes back to the past in different ways, and like you, I've won a lot of awards. I didn't set out to do that, but I was molested as a child, and there's no anger here for some reason, but it was in my being my whole life. And I went to a psychiatrist, and it came out, and Terrell has a name, and it was Mr. Honeycutt, because that goes back to that childhood molestation that I had just put on I'd buried it, and it won the Faulkner it was a finalist in the Faulkner competition, and like I said, it's a must read for every child, a parent of a child who's been molested, and that's Mr. Honeycutt there. That's what he looked like to me, standing in the doorway of my bedroom at night. But again, and I'm going to say this, Bill, you might not want to record this, he was black. And I think on a certain level, I knew as a little 4-year-old that if I told, he'd be killed. You know? And I think that's why I didn't tell. I couldn't be responsible for somebody being killed.
Wow.
You know? Come up churning and keep your buckets high. That's a history of kind of my family history growing up. And I remember my grandma made homemade cottage cheese from fresh cow's milk. And when I no longer know who I am, I think I remember sipping milk from my grandmother's cow. So while that taste still lingers in my mouth, I go back to the places where memory begins and pour my first cup into a bucket, a cup of warm, buttery milk. And that's how this got. This is just about growing up in the South and in Mississippi. And that's it. Well, this is full, and it's a pretty good book. Taking different stories from this, and I would win prizes with them, you know. And I was looking at all these prizes I won. Actually, Faulkner inspired me.
Yeah. Did you know Faulkner?
I didn't know him personally, but I was at Ole Miss when he was we would go to a certain cafe, my friends and I, about 2 or 3 times a week, and William Faulkner was in there smoking a pipe and looking at the girls, you know. And I was fascinated by him. And I started reading his books, you know, and I just got entranced with William Faulkner. So, and I liked Eudora Welty. I kind of like the old stories, you know, I don't know.
Do you have any recommendation for writers?
Any recommendation for writers? Write about what you know about. And you just got to, I sit down and look at my dog's eyes and I think, there's a story there. Yeah, it is. That's not very intense and literary, but it's, you know, I write about what I just think about things, and I could write a story about that right now, and about Philip Levin, you know.
This is Dr. Philip Levin. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to my videos.